Okay, hello! So if you're new to the channel, I use data science to answer questions that are mostly stupid, sometimes serious, and today's is somehow both. So in my last video, which was a data analysis of content cop, I included a hint at the very end as to what my next video would be on. No one responded, but I thought it was clever, so I'm going to repeat it here. The hint was, home is where the likes are. And y'all read the title. Today's video is about content houses or influencer houses, collab mansions, you get the idea. So content mansions are nothing new. They've been around since 2014 with the Our Second Life mansion, and of course you've got Jake Paul and his Team 10 house, the Clout house, FaZe Clan. There's been a long tradition of influencers living together and making content with one another. It's such an easy way to maintain and keep your audience engaged. But this past summer, the phenomenon has just totally exploded. I follow this reporter on Twitter. Her name is Taylor Lorenz, shout out. And it seems like every day she tweets about a new creator mansion alert. And it was just really got me thinking, how many mansions have launched since the beginning of quarantine? And once I started digging through the data, I was just fascinated. I knew I wanted to make a video on it. And I made a map out of it. So real quick, before I get into the map and my findings, let's talk methodology. So collecting data on the mansions itself was a manual process. I used a lot of Taylor's tweets that I had mentioned before and just read a lot of the reporting on content mansions and accumulated a list that I think is pretty comprehensive of all of the content houses that have launched since March. It's a chance I missed one, and if I did, please let me know in the comments, and I will include all my sources in the description. So yeah, once I got a list of all the mansions, I individually looked up each of the members, which was also kind of confusing because it seems like the member list is like constantly changing. People will leave or people will like get silently dropped and you won't know unless you're like watching the TikToks. So take that with a grain of salt too. The members might not be accurate, but I did triple check most of these, so I feel fairly confident. The only reason it might not be accurate is that I collected this data a few weeks ago. Things can happen in a few weeks. The other piece of information I recorded was where each of the members were located before joining the content house. And I got that data from various locations. The primary source of that data was Famous Birthdays, which, is it accurate? I don't know. I didn't super look into their methodology, but I just figured it's easily scrapable, so there's that. But if it wasn't on Famous Birthdays, I would either look for news articles that have been written about the content creators or looking at social media posts to try and figure out where each of them were living prior to moving into this mansion. I also scraped all of the images from Famous Birthdays and or their TikTok profile. I'm only mentioning that because the script I wrote for scraping those images opened up like a million tabs in my laptop, and it gave me such an anxiety attack. And I guess I'm a sadist because if I had to see it, y'all do too. Horrible, right? Absolutely horrible. And with all that ready, we're off to the races. Okay, so there are about 20 mansions that have launched since mid-March, which is when much of the world went into lockdown. I'm not going to go into each of the mansions because that would take an hour, but I've picked out a few examples that I think highlights the points I think are worth hitting upon, and I'll include a link to the interactive map in the description if you would also like to explore some of the houses that I haven't touched upon in this video. So remember how I said there's been more than 20 houses that launched this summer? 12 of those houses are just in the Los Angeles area. So Los Angeles is definitely the hub of this new crop of content houses. No one's really surprised there, but I do want to make note of the fact that these 12 houses represent about 85 different creators, all of whom were flying in from various cities and states and countries. Little preview what's to come. So I want to start by looking at the Alpha House. The Alpha House is a newer house. It launched in mid-August, I believe. And the Alpha House has been heavily criticized because it threw a party with what looked like about 150 kids only 3 days after they moved into the mansion. I don't think I have to explain why that's bad, but if for some reason you're watching from the future, we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. Everyone is on lockdown. We're trying to limit contact as much as we can, and this is not the way to do that. Beyond that, their neighbors have also claimed that the Alpha House has thrown parties every single day since it moved in. So the third day is the only one we have video evidence of, but it's very likely that this was the third day and the third party they've thrown in that mansion. Why am I bringing this up? Well, 2 of the members are from the LA area, so I guess it's not that big of a deal to move from one house to another much bigger, much more expensive house if it's only a 30-minute drive away. But let's zoom out a bit. Yeah, so 7 of the 9 members of the Alpha House were from outside of LA, 5 of whom moved from out of state, a lot of them coming from the East Coast. And you might be saying, okay, what's so bad about that? Well, first of all, the fact that they've been throwing parties every day makes me feel like their moving process was not the most responsible or safe for themselves and other people involved. And obviously, like, CDC and government guidelines have been saying, don't travel. And I understand moving is not traveling, and some people very well might need to move. Maybe they're in a dangerous situation, but I don't think that's the case for any of these TikTok creators. Like, not only are they moving across state, but they're moving into a situation where they're living in large groups of people, which obviously presents more of a risk when there's a virus, a deadly virus out there. The other thing I want to know is, like, way back in summer, maybe like April or March, this girl made this network of all of the influencers who had interacted with each other, and it's just looking at that and looking at this, it's so clear to me that this whole influencer collaboration mess has very high potential to be super spreader. Let me try and drive this point further. This is the Vault House. It's another content mansion that launched back in April. Similar to the Alpha House, it's got a couple of members from the LA area, 5 to be exact. But when we zoom out, you'll see that 6 of its members are from elsewhere, one of whom even moved from abroad. I'm not gonna say that there needs to be a halt on immigration. In fact, that was one of the things that Trump was trigger happy to do, close down the borders. But again, is this necessary? And like very early on in the whole content mention culture, it was predominantly just groups of friends that were getting together and thinking it would be fun to move in with one another. Nowadays, the space is dominated by talent agencies, marketing departments, and even corporate brands. So, for example, the multi-million-dollar business Fenty Beauty launched their own content house back in March. And as we'll get to later, many of these houses are managed by random brand agencies that just seem to be popping up out of nowhere. This business model has led to a lot of drama and a lot of public squabbles. My hypothesis for that being that these people don't know each other. When you're picked by talent agencies to move into a mansion together, you probably have not met these people before. Recipe for disaster, especially because they're so young. One of the reasons I wanted to highlight the Vault House is that it is run by a talent agency. It's run by 6 Degrees of Influence, and the members of this house were carefully curated. And the reality is that other talent agencies exist, and they can poach creators from already existing content houses to join their content house. It's really kind of cutthroat. And that happened here with the Vault House. So Devin Winkler of Texas left this house to join another mansion, the Not a Content House. And in this map, people who left are marked by images with lower opacity. Anyhow, let's look at the Not a Content House, because that's also kind of interesting. The Not a Content House, surprise, surprise, has also been criticized for throwing several parties. But what I find far more interesting about this ordeal is that this house is managed by the West of Hudson Group Incorporated, also known as whY, whY, if you will. And this management firm is a subsidiary of a healthcare corporation. Just So bizarre. Anyhow, whY owns a network of content houses with 4 mansions in it. So there's not a content house. And one of the other 3 is the Clubhouse, which might seem familiar to you. So arguably the most high-profile content house right now is the Hype House. Was the one with the D'Amelios, Chase Hudson, others. Yeah, I don't know about any of their current member status. But one of the co-founders of the Hype House was named Daisy Keech. And she had a very public falling out with the other members of the Hype House because she felt that she was getting cut out of a lot of the media coverage. And it's a whole thing. Link here if you want to understand it more. But after leaving the Hype House, she went on to found the Clubhouse. And because she was so popular and she had all this energy around her name, the Clubhouse quickly gained steam. She also ended up leaving the Clubhouse for reasons that I couldn't really wrap my brain around. I don't really get it, girl, but you do you. The Clubhouse was a massive success, and it ended up spawning sister houses. So you've got Clubhouse Next, which is primarily for younger and up-and-coming influencers, and you've got Clubhouse for the Boys, which is, as its name would imply, for the boys. And the members of all of these 4 houses, Clubhouse Next, Clubhouse for the Boys, Clubhouse, and Not a Content House, frequently collaborate with one another. So together, this network of houses represents nearly 30 different influencers, all of whom flew in from various states and countries and collaborate with one another. Not to mention the fact that they collaborate with other houses and all of them have been seen frequenting parties at other houses. It's just such a mess. It's such a mess. But Los Angeles is not the only place where content mentions exist. So the Halo House, for example, is based in Scottsdale. The Halo House is one of the smaller houses. It's only got 4 members, and 2 of them are a couple. The other 2 are from out of state, but they all seem like they were friends. And there's also the house nobody asked for, which is based in Las Vegas. They were all living in a small pad in Los Angeles before and moved into this massive mansion. I don't know how they afforded it, but they said they finessed the system. And obviously, I don't know any of the people in these houses, and I'm not trying to make or pass judgments on them. But like the Halo House, for example, that seems responsible to me. 4 people, that's effectively like a college apartment. And at least they have their own bedrooms, so they can safely quarantine if they need to. But yeah, the phenomenon is also gaining steam overseas. So as of now, there are 2 houses based in England, 1 in Ireland, and 1 in Spain, but the one in Spain is made up of creators from the UK. It's called the Jet House, which they say their namesake is based on the fact that they're all jet-setting types, which, first of all, if you're buying this mansion, that presumably means you're not going to be traveling a lot because you're stuck in the mansion. Second of all, you're really going to start a brand based off of travel during COVID? I just wanted to point out, so the G.O.A.T house, which is the one in Ireland, they've been criticized by Dubliners for seemingly violating the government guidelines, because in Ireland, you cannot have a group of more than 6 people from 3 different households. And this is a house of way more than 6 people, all from different households coming together. You've also got the Byte Squad, which was the first content house to launch outside of the United States. The BBC ran a story about this house that family members had expressed reservations about the timing of the move, which makes me wonder, where are the parents in all of this? Like, these people, some of them are young adults, some of them are my age, like early 20s. A lot of them are teenagers. A lot of them. But I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, like, if your child is the one who's like way out earning you and like paying for all the bills, why wouldn't you support a decision that would inevitably increase that wealth? And the G.O.A.T house did release a statement saying that they moved in responsibly, which is great, and I'm glad they did. But to me, the whole idea of releasing a statement like that only after criticism has been made is kind of, like, y'all are influencers. It's in the name. You should be a good influence. Like, if you are doing this thing which appears very reckless and irresponsible on the surface, you should do everything in your power to show that you are not being reckless, and in fact you are taking extreme precautions and you do care about your own health and the health of others. And there is one house in like Tulum, Mexico, but it's not really a content house so much as it is like an entrepreneur incubator house. That honestly seemed kind of annoying. But yeah, most of them are from San Francisco. It's not really like the other ones, but I threw it in there. So why does this matter? I touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but these are influencers. If you added up all of their followers, there's got to be like 1 million impressionable kids looking up to this kind of behavior, which on its surface is not bad, but it could spell disaster very quickly. And anything that could be perceived as dangerous, the people behind those actions should get out ahead of it and explain why they're making it not dangerous. What are they doing to help prevent the spread of disease? Like, maybe I'm projecting, but if I had that kind of reach during this time right now, I would do everything in my power to show the little kids watching me that staying at home can be fun and it can be cool, or at least bearable, right? Like, the message they're sending while moving to all these mansions is that, man, I could not stay in my like dingy bedroom, which was like perfectly normally sized. I had to move into this mansion if I'm going to be stuck inside all day. And let's be honest, they're not stuck inside because they're flagrantly violating stay-at-home orders. This like culture of like frequently moving and living in big groups is like ultimately giving a huge envy boner to their young audiences. I don't know, ultimately I just feel like a lot of kids watching this are going to be like wishing that they could either move into a bigger house or could travel, both of which right now puts human lives at risk. I don't want to make it sound like I'm ragging on the influencers themselves, because I'm very conscious of the fact that it's possible they might be the ones who are being exploited in this scenario. I mentioned that a lot of these content houses are set up by corporations, by marketing agencies, by brands. These young people could be getting shoehorned into contracts and having to do this. It's entirely possible. And in that scenario, these young people are workers. And it's never right to shit on workers. You should always look at who's forcing them to live and work in those dangerous conditions. But just because the incentives are so great here, you get to increase your brand, your wealth, and you get to live in a mansion. And the fact that I know that a lot of these content houses are set up by influencers themselves, like the Clubhouse, for example, I feel that it's okay to challenge the actions of these influencers and to demand accountability. So like ultimately I would say, I know a lot of these influencers have been living in these mansions for a long time now, and I'm completely sympathetic to the people who were living in content mansions before the pandemic started and had to decide whether or not they would continue quarantining with these like friends they just met or with their family back home. But to the people who decided to move into a house during quarantine, what the fuck? If you did that, you should give a serious explanation as to why and how you did it. Show receipts. Show that you did it safely. Show that you quarantined for at least 2 weeks after moving into an unfamiliar place and then started going outside. Then maybe you won't get shat on all the time. The parties are really bad, and they have been getting most of the public's outrage, and deservedly so. But this, in my eyes, is potentially just as dangerous, but is not immediately as dangerous, so people are cutting some slack, which I understand. I am just not one of those people. So yeah, I don't know if I articulated myself well in this. I hope I did. This isn't like my normal videos. My normal videos involve a bit more data analysis, hypothesis testing, all that jazz. But today I wanted to make a map, and a map I did make. Maps do not lend itself to data analysis particularly well, but I thought it was an interesting lens to view this issue through. And my god, I just love making maps. I love it so much. Yeah, links are in description as always, and I'll catch you all in the next one. It's really exciting. I don't want to say what it is, but I will include a hint in 2 seconds. Okay, bye!